I know this isn't a full episode, but I'm going to give it a cold opening anyway. I watched over a day's worth of television so that you don't have to. Because on this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss the Swamp Thing television shows.
The swamp is my world. It is who I am. It is what I am. I was once a man. I know the evil men do. Do not bring your evil here. I warn you. Beware the wrath of Swamp Thing.
But this is really a one-shot, so Chad is with me. We're going to have a nerdy conversation about both the 1990, which is, again, what I watch, 72 30-minute episodes, really like 23 minutes without the commercials, but 72 episodes of that wonderful show from the early 1990s. And then we'll go into the short, much shorter.
Yeah, unfortunately.
2019 Swamp Thing that, only has 10 episodes, but we'll get into that. So yeah, we're in our March Madness, our march through Swamp Thing and everything TV and movie related when it comes to Swamp Thing, or mainly Swamp Thing. We're not getting into like the Justice League Dark animated series or his couple of appearances on Justice League Action, that short little cartoon. Mm-hmm. But if you are of a certain age, the age that Chad and I am, you remember watching the 1990 Swamp Thing on television.
Yeah. I remember it being pretty good, but I think we'll get into that.
Yeah. We remember a lot of things a lot more favorable than we find out they actually were.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Swamp Thing, this was a television show that aired on the USA Network early in its days. Cable television became a thing in the mid to late 80s, and USA Network, I didn't look up when they actually officially started, but I know this was right at the beginning of cable TV and just having to fill stuff, and USA wanted to do an original series, and they came up with Swamp Thing. It aired from July 27th of 1990 all the way to May 1st of 1993. 3 seasons.
Shockingly, yeah.
Amazing. This thing lasted 3 seasons.
Man.
Season number 1 was 22 episodes, and it's actually split into 2 parts. They had like the first, I think it was 12 episodes, then they had a gap, and then they finished with the remaining 10.
You mean there was a possibility that they stopped with only 12 episodes of the show?
So well, what it was, and we'll get into this probably a little bit more, but what it was it was a retooling of the show, because they decided, instead of going for the aiming at the kids, is what the first like 11, 12 episodes are.
Right.
They wanted it to make more towards the older teens and the adult. I mean, they put the show on at 10:30 at night.
Right.
Well, then season 2 only had 11 episodes, and then season 3 had 39.
Yeah.
There are 39 episodes in season 3.
So, I know you already talked about this with Tim, but it's a continuation of the Wes Craven movie. So when they retooled it, right.
Ish. Yeah.
So when they retooled it, was the attempt to get back toward that, or, that whole thing, or how'd it go?
I know that part of it, from what I've read, was that it just wasn't really clicking with audiences. To try to go for the to try to go for the more kid-oriented version, which is that's always been a thing with me when it comes to Swamp Thing, because I mentioned he's on that Justice League Action. Okay, you see this character on this Cartoon Network series, and you say to yourself, if you're a kid, you're like, "Oh, I want to know who Swamp Thing is." You read those comic books, they're gonna mess you up.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I I've always liked the anti-hero a little bit. So I gravitated towards Swamp Thing as, I don't know, probably middle school time frame, which was perfect because the entire run of why am I drawing a blank? Good grief, Alan
Moore.
Yeah, there we go. Good grief. The most famous comic book writer of all time.
But
Alan Moore's run was already out.
This was before he was famous. Like he was brand new when he did. This was before Watchmen. This was,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so you had the Alan Moore run, and it was getting really, really good. But yeah, he is not kid friendly.
Oh no.
But that's what makes him so interesting, in my opinion. The whole conundrum of, what is a plant's ethic, and so you kind of have to deal with that whole thing, and
yeah.
So, anyways,
now I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, that it may have been the Swamp Thing episode with Tim, that when Alan Moore made his first Swamp Thing comic, he said, we're not going to even worry about the comic code. Like, this is going to be an adult comic. And so it was one of the first comics since the comic code.
I think it was the first that they just said, we're not even going to care if we get the stamp on it or not.
Yeah, but and of course it plays a little bit into this series. I will say the Alan Moore probably had more influence on the 2019, so we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I did find it interesting, going back to it being on USA. This was USA Network's top rated show.
Wow, that's
so here's the question: is that a high point for Swamp Thing? Or if you know what these shows are like, does that mean, well, what else was on USA Network?
Yeah, that's exactly kind of where my mind went, was what else was on at this time period. Because you didn't have the first... You didn't have The Flash yet. Some of those other comic book shows that came on in the later 90s. So you don't really have anything to compare it to in that sense. But man, I mean, even going back to the movie, it's so bad. Like, even time period wise, it's so bad. And so the whole thing, it confuses me about the early 90s TV run, because who watched that movie and went, we should do a continuation TV show of this?
Well, they made the sequel first, though.
This is true. But it looks like a low budget A-Team.
Hey, don't down
it was
the
a
A-Team.
feature film. It was a feature film from a known director. The whole thing, you just watch it, is so bad. I think there's like a couple of good moments in it when Alan Holland catches on fire.
Yes.
When the liquid explodes
Tim
on
and I talked about that.
He is on fire.
It's a 28-second burn, which is extremely long,
and an 1,000% burn.
Oh yeah,
there's not just like a
lit.
patch.
He's lit.
That dude is head to toe on fire.
There's just a wall of flame running from that door to the swamp.
But anyways, so that guy's probably not with us anymore. That stuntman has perished a long time ago, I'm sure.
So because of the way we're recording, you probably haven't heard me and Tim talk on the episode yet. Do you know that the same Tim cracked this again? Leave it to the '80s guy to give me information about an '80s movie. When you see Freddy Krueger burning in the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie, same stuntman.
Oh wow!
So Wes Craven saw him do this and went, I'm going to use you again.
This guy is not afraid of anything. So nice. But yeah, I mean, just it baffles me that somebody watched that movie and then went, we should make a TV show out of this. Because even, in my opinion, Tim would definitely be the one to ask this question to, but in my opinion, even compared to other movies at the same time, it's bad.
It was a rubber suit creature feature.
Oh my gosh. Well, and he said that's part of what he was trying to do, was like he was kind of homaging the
Black
whole,
Lagoon.
50s B movie stuff, and but he did it too well, in my opinion. Like, he just made a bad movie instead of taking the cool things of those movies that make them cult classics and honoring that and maybe adding something new. Wes Craven just did it a little too well, and so now it'd be like if we tried to do one today, in high def, it just doesn't work because all the flaws are a little too on the nose. So, anyways, but yeah, it's just confusing to me that the 90s TV show was made in the first place. I did not, however, know the whole thing about the disparity in episodes between the second and third season.
Oh my goodness.
But the other thing that gets me about the 90s show is I did not watch all 72 episodes like you did, but even just the few that I perused because I wanted to gouge my eyes out. Otherwise, they're totally encapsulated episodes.
Yes.
There's no real build on anything. Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like you wouldn't notice that one season had, what was it, 12 episodes or 11 episodes?
No, you
and
don't.
Then the next season has 39?
Yeah, and honestly, when you're watching it, so now I do own them on DVD, but they also are on Tubi. In fact, as we have found out, all of these Swamp Things are on Tubi. The first movie, the second movie, the cartoon, the television show,
nice.
Everything but the 2019, they're all on Tubi.
Right.
But on Tubi, they are in the order that they aired. The DVD put them in the correct chronological order of the story.
Right.
Even though there's, like you're saying, there's not much of a story.
Yeah, there's not
but
really
there
a through
are
plot.
little side things that when you're watching it out of order on Tubi, you're going, okay, but I thought this person was here, and I thought that this happened to this person, and hey, I haven't seen that guy in like 12 episodes. Like, all of a sudden, somebody came back. So yeah. Now, here's the other thing. You said you saw a couple of episodes. Did you notice, I mean, clearly, you may not be familiar, but were you aware that it was filmed on Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida?
No.
Yes.
No, I didn't know
It was filmed at Universal Studios, like brand new, early 90s. So
yeah.
Just had opened. Universal Studios, Orlando,
hilarious.
Florida. And if you had been there in the early 90s, there's a lot of little pieces that you go, wait, I recognize that. For instance,
that's funny.
There's a boat that explodes like 3 different times on this show. It's the same boat that is exploding. It has the same horrible effect of it explodes and then just splits in half. And I went, that's the boat from the Jaws ride.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. No, I didn't notice that at all.
Yeah.
I did not pay attention to that.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
Wow.
Random tidbit that I have here in my notes. The show, you talked about who? The show was developed by the same guy who wrote the movie Psycho.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very surprising. I mean, I don't know. I could definitely see that guy's brain reading the comic book and realizing the genius there and going, this needs to be on another medium. Unfortunately, it didn't. It was maybe, I don't know, 20 years ahead of its time. Please tell me he didn't write any episodes, though. That would be kind of heartbreaking.
I'll have to do a little, while we're talking, do a little internet research to find that one out.
That would hurt.
But yeah, but he now again, he developed it for television. That
right.
was my
note.
note.
He probably sold it to USA.
Nope. He wrote 2 episodes. He wrote the first episode,
okay,
The Emerald Heart, and then he wrote, oh my dear Lord, he wrote this episode. He wrote the episode Falco, which was this one about this. I'm gonna make sure I'm remembering this is the right episode because I didn't really pay attention to episode titles.
Names.
He wrote the story for 3 other episodes, but he was the actual writer of those 2 episodes. Was Falco the one I was thinking about? Yes. So Falco is the one where there's an assassin who's going after Arcane, and he's got his arm in a sling the entire episode, and he's trying to attack Arcane, trying to kill Arcane. And then when Swamp Thing tries to find out why he's doing it and all that, the guy removes his sling to uncover that his other arm is a giant bird wing. And he said, "Oh no, you're a failed attempt at one of his monster
The
creations."
mutagen, yeah.
No. He was a bird that
Oh.
Arcane turned into a man.
All right.
Yeah, he was
I
a.
feel like
Hold up.
I feel like post Psycho, he just maybe read a little too much Island of Dr. Moreau while doing some acid. Like,
I know we're an audio podcast, but I am going to show Chad a picture here of this guy with his bird arm.
oh, this is
Whoops.
amazing.
Yeah, there you go, right there. This big, just his big bird arm.
All right.
Yeah, and then Swamp Thing just kind of talks him into not being evil anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
he saves the little kid from drowning, and then he just walks away.
yeah, buddy. Yeah.
Cue the lonely man. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. The show just, to me, it probably is actually better than I'm making it out to be.
It's not.
So my bias, though, is the comics are so good.
Yes.
Like when you talk to people who love comic books, and I don't just mean, love Batman or, that kind of thing, but love comic books. Swamp Thing is really an interesting book, and there's especially Alan Moore Ford. Like pre Alan Moore, it's interesting and there's some potential there, but he's just kind of this second tier monster that a guy who
goes issue to issue with
and it leans a little too much into the Hulk. You just have a scientist who has a failed experiment kind of thing. When Alan Moore takes over and he kills the scientist and makes it this entirely different thing where now it's a plant that absorbed the memories of a human, and that sort of, it changed the paradigm altogether. Now it's just the monster. Like, and you have this whole canon of stuff where he gets to wrestle with, what does that mean? Like, where does his allegiance really lie in?
Yes.
And he has all these human memories that make him want to, see eye to eye with humanity, but he's wrestling constantly with, is that even real? Like, I have no allegiance to humanity. And so it's just super, super interesting. And he's arguably top 3, 4 most powerful characters in DC, and totally gets overlooked. Like, he is a planetary threat kind of guy. Like, people forget that he could, in theory, make all plant life rise up and, overthrow mankind or something at whim. He fights Superman to a draw. He cons Batman, which is one of my favorite Swamp Thing deal. He goes in and tells Batman, basically, I'm obviously condensing this hugely, but he tells Batman that he can bring his parents back.
We are talking like 50 years of comics here, so
yeah. He goes and tells Batman he can bring his parents back because no one really dies. They're all part of like the life cycle. And then Batman does his portion of the deal. They go and save the day. And then Batman's like, what about my parents? As Swamp Thing just deteriorates straight into the ground. He's like, totally ghosts him. Like, it's just, I'm out. And so he's pretty cold-blooded.
Well, and they play with some of these thoughts in this show. You can definitely tell, by this time they went, okay, there's now this Alan Moore version. And so in this show, they do hold on to that he is Alec Holland. In fact, everybody calls him either Dr. Holland or they call him Alec. He's never called Swamp Thing. Arcane's always calling him Holland. The
as
mom,
bad guys do.
Yeah, the mom and the kid always call him Alec. And so they do hold on to that. But at the same time, they do kind of a version of the green, quote unquote, the green, to where the swamp is its own entity. And he talks about that he must obey the laws of the swamp, and the swamp does this and the swamp does that. He's always referring to that, but he's also you talk about the power he shows in the show, which I'm just going to go ahead and say, he always has the power he needs when he needs it. But and that includes being able to control the weather, which he does. That includes being able to allow someone to time travel,
Yeah.
which they do as well. So yeah, it's weird, his power set in the 90s show.
Well, to be fair, in the books, I don't remember time travel per se, but he can cast his consciousness into the other dimensions, the other Earths. Mm-hmm. He saves himself, at least during Crisis on Infinite Earths, I'm pretty sure, he saves himself by casting his consciousness into a different world.
Yes.
So that he can survive. So but like that's his thing, and what makes him virtually infinitely powerful is, I mean, I guess he has a finite thing on barren worlds. That's pretty much it. But any world in any universe that has plant life, boop, Swamp Thing can pop up there and start over. So pretty interesting and powerful character. But yeah, I don't know about time travel. Isn't it also in the TV shows, or in the the 90s TV show, where he has the power to like bring people back to life?
He has that in all of them. In the original 82 movie, he does that to both Adrian Barbeau's character, and he does it to the little boy. He brings both of them back from the dead. And then in the third movie, he does it, or the third movie. Then in the second movie, he does it with Abby Arcane, with Heather Locklear. Okay. He brings her back from the dead. But then, in this show, he's constantly bringing people back from the dead. And then there's of course the episode where Arcane, I think this is when season 3 officially starts. They all of a sudden give this storyline to Arcane where they give him the Mr. Freeze storyline, where he has a wife that had fallen ill, and he's got her cryogenically frozen because he's trying to find a cure for her disease.
Yeah, so they're trying to make him a sympathetic villain.
Yes. And they have an episode where she wakes up. Now, if you want to get into all of this, you end up finding out that she's actually not the original wife, that she was actually a woman who Sutherland made to look like his wife, and so he's had just this random woman in a tube for all these years.
Nice. Yeah.
But then you find out that his actual wife's been alive this entire time, and and has been with Sutherland, but then she gets killed. He finds her finally, but then she gets killed, and he asks Swamp Thing to bring her back, like carries her body to Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Says, bring her back. And although he resists a little bit, he does agree to do it. But when he goes to do it, he says he can't because her soul has already left.
Yeah, she ghosted him in the eternity. She was like, I'm out.
Yeah. Found out that he's a villain. I do want to talk about, because we've talked about him and all the other stuff, because he has been Swamp Thing for pretty much forever, other than the 2019 version. What are your thoughts on Dick Durock as Swamp Thing? He was Swamp Thing in both movies. He was Swamp Thing in all 72 episodes of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some of me just kind of wonders, how much better could he have done given the writing, and so I don't dislike him as an actor. I think honestly, there are moments where I kind of actually am impressed with how much emotion he's getting through this amount of makeup and rubber face.
Yeah, he's good with facial expressions
and eyes. Like he can really cast some emotion through his eyes, and so in that aspect, I think he did really well with what he was given. It's just so poorly written, and it's the acting is time period. I wouldn't say that, by today's standards, it's really hard to judge, because you also, you go back and look at tons of movies from that era and you're like, holy cow, these are bad actors. But they were just doing what was considered, good at the time. So I think him as Swamp Thing is fine. I don't know that he ever picked up an issue of the comic book. I don't think his portrayal was informed by the source material at all. But again, I feel like that's kind of a time thing.
The writing. So I wanted to also bring him up because you and I, when we recorded Logan, we talked about Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman getting the credit for playing, like, who really gets the credit for playing the character the most for the longest. How does Dick Durock stand up? Because you're talking about 2 movies and 72 episodes, 30-minute episodes. Yeah. I would really like to see because we talked about, I don't think I've ever looked it up, but is it based off of hours on screen? Because Dick Durock's got to come up there.
Yeah, I was about to say, if we're going purely on screen time, he's got a good argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even's got to stand up just in, years that you were cast as the character, because that's 12 years of that. Mm-hmm. So so I don't know. That's pretty interesting. Did he do any of the voice work for the animated stuff?
No.
Was he ever? I didn't think.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't He wasn't the voice actor for the show. That was clear because that voice actor sounded like a superhero. Like, it didn't sound like Swamp Thing. It's like, don't worry, Billy, I'll save you. Did not sound like a.
Oh my gosh!
But Dick Durock also didn't do the voice in either one of the movies. In the first movie, it was still Ray Wise's voice. Ray Wise played Alec Holland. It was still his voice. In the second movie, he was dubbed by another actor.
Sure.
But
was it one of the Darth Vader things where he didn't know he was going to be dubbed, or?
Yeah, it actually was.
Oh, dang. Yeah. That's gotta suck.
Actually, he nor the director knew that he was going to be dubbed. Wow. Yeah.
Oof.
But in this one, everything I've looked at, it points to it is his voice. It's just a electronically
modulated.
Altered. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is Dick Durock's voice. But he was. We talked about this in the Swamp Thing episode. He was committed to the character, and now that he's doing it as a television show, he would spend 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in that costume, in that suit. Wow. And apparently the suit weighed 80 pounds.
Yeah, and cannot have been breathable.
Yeah. It also definitely limited his movement. Like, he couldn't turn his head. When he turns, his shoulders have to be involved.
Yeah.
To look in another direction.
Yeah, because he's got no neck. Yeah. It's just
he had those
rubber
twigs that connected his shoulders to his head.
Oh my gosh, dude! Oh boy.
Did you happen to catch some episodes with Arcane? Did you see Arcane?
I don't remember, to be honest with you. I was catching mostly stuff that's on YouTube, just fishing around.
A completely different portrayal of Arcane from the movies.
Well, yeah, I would think so.
This Arcane,
he's not Man Bear Pig.
No. But he's also not even though they tried to give him kind of that suave persona that Louis Jourdain had in the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
They made him, he's just the crackpot scientist. They did get a guy with a British accent, but
that's all bad guys are bad.
Oh my goodness. And then his hair. Oh, just this mane of hair.
Oh, yeah,
that he had. Yeah. But he, the actor, Mark Lindsay Chapman, he got top bill. Like, every single episode, when the opening credits said starring Mark Lindsay Chapman.
Really?
Even on episodes he wasn't in. Starring Mark Lindsay Chapman.
That's fascinating.
And Dick Durock always got Dick Durock as Swamp Thing. Like, he was always at the end of the credits.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Very interesting.
But I do want to talk about Jim, the little boy that was in the first 12 episodes. So Jim is in the first 12 at Jim Kip with his mom, Teresa, who stayed on for the rest of the series. But Jim Kip, he was written off after the first 12 episodes. Now, how do they write him off? They have Arcane sell him to a South American child stealing ring. Like, I'm just the nicest way I could put it there.
Oh boy.
Yeah, sells them to kidnappers in South America.
And yet mom stays on the rest of the show.
Yeah, so what they do is they have it happen, then they show his mom distraught over the matter. Then they have his stepbrother, who there's been no mention of. They have his stepbrother show up, who is Will, who then would be kind of that character going forward. The older stepbrother. You have him show up, and he says, "I'm going to find out what happened to Jim." Then Arcane and the sheriff stage his death, like make it look like he got hit by a car.
Yeah.
Then we find out at the end of the episode, we see this crate on the back of a truck that, based off of the events that happened in the episode, we know he's inside the crate, and it just drives away. We do not get any mention of Jim until season 3, when it is mentioned that he was found, and then Teresa goes off to get him, but never brings him back. She just goes off to get him.
Holy cow.
Then there's another episode where you find out that she sent him to live with his father, who she's divorced from, because she thought he'd be safer there.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot going on there. They couldn't have chosen like a better place for Swamp Thing to not be able to go to. Because after we just talked about all the Swamp Thing's powers, what comes to mind when you think of South America? Jungles.
Yeah.
Like, so a being that can control all plant life, he should probably be able to track down Jim pretty quick and take care of this problem.
But they also, like I mentioned about with the swamp earlier, they establish in this show, now of course it's later into the show, that he's connected to that swamp. Like he can't,
the bayou.
That like if he's too far away from that swamp,
Right,
he starts to lose his powers and become weak. And
oh my gosh, oh boy,
yeah,
so many problems.
Now, did you remember that they had their own version of Abby Arcane?
Vaguely, yeah.
So they did, but she wasn't Abby Arcane. They just brought in this character. They've now introduced Will, this older teenage stepson of Teresa.
Right.
And they have to keep saying stepson because she's literally like 6 years older. And I say literally, I don't know. She's like maybe 6-7 years older than him.
Oh boy.
So they bring in a synthetically created girl, and this is the first time we see the Jaws boat explode, because she has escaped from that ship.
Oh.
And her name is Abigail, played by 90s actress Carrie Wurr. Remember
Really?
Carrie Wurr?
Yeah.
From Sliders?
Yeah.
Yep. Played by Carrie Wurr. So, bring in you got the teenage boy, now bring in the, older teenage girl.
Yeah.
And her name was Abigail.
The 28-year-old teenage girl?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, the Saved by the Bell versions of teenagers.
90210.
Yeah.
All that, yeah.
But her name was Abigail, and you can't help but go, okay, they're making the connection but there's never any actual connection to her being Arcane. And then she disappears in season 2. There's no more Abigail when season 2 starts. Mm-hmm. Until episode 3. And this is where I'm talking about things kind of get out of order. Episode 3, she's back, and then it's an episode called Misdemeanor.
Nice.
Because it's about this killer fog, this killer mist, which at the end of the episode, she is saving a little boy, but she's not able to escape the mist. And so the mist kills her. So they brought her back for one episode in season 2 to kill her.
Yeah, but isn't she synthetic? Why would it? Never mind.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Don't apply logic to this show at all. Do not even think to apply logic. Because nothing stays consistent. Swamp Thing, as the show goes along, Swamp Thing doesn't kill. He finds other ways to stop the bad or fix the problem, but he doesn't kill. Except
'Cause
in the
that's straight from the comics.
very first episode when he turns a dude into a tree.
Yeah.
Straight up murders this guy, turns him into a tree.
Well, I mean, he's still alive, you know. So.
Well, yeah. He does, however, kills Medusa.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a mercy killing.
Okay.
Yeah, they did a Greek mythology episode where you had Medusa and you had.
I mean, it was the early '90s. You had to.
Yeah, and she was being hunted by Perseus, who did absolutely nothing in the episode. Perseus does nothing in that episode.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, because like I said, Swamp Thing ends up killing Medusa. And again, I don't want to even explain the episode, but it was a mercy killing. And after he kills her and she falls down, then Perseus runs up and all he does is just look at Swamp Thing, and then they both just disappear. Medusa and Perseus just both disappear.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know what else to say about this show because it's exactly what you said. The Swamp Thing, even though this is a Swamp Thing television show, Swamp Thing feels like a secondary character.
Yeah, which is why he didn't get top billing. So, I mean...
Yeah. But, and I don't know if it was because... So, at the time on USA, they had the Radbury Theater. They had the Hitchhiker television series. And so, this Swamp Thing started to feel like one of those anthology-type shows with, you know, like The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, with Swamp Thing just being kind of the narrator or just being the thing that kind of was the catalyst for the events.
Yeah, I don't know that I've got a whole lot more to add to that. Like, it's a very strange show. I don't understand how it got made for 72 episodes, but I think that makes the 2019 show that much more tragic, in my opinion, that the early 90s episode got so much runtime and then a bunch of stuff cut a good show short, in my opinion.
Yeah, so just to wrap up with this show, so the comic book connections I could actually find were, of course, Alec Holland becoming Swamp Thing.
Right. Fair enough.
Arcane is the villain. There you go.
Heck yeah.
The names Abigail,
Sunderland.
Dr. Woodrow, and Sutherland are all used. Yeah. Of course, we already talked about Abigail. Woodrow is named all the time, but we never see him. Sutherland is eventually seen, and then he dies. So yeah. That's it.
That's it. Did you feel like they were setting up Woodrow?
No.
As a future villain? Or no?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Nope. In fact, it felt more like Woodrow was Arcane's competitor. And Arcane was always trying to steal stuff from him. Yeah.
All right.
And again, I don't think I mentioned this. Abigail was created by Woodrow.
Oh, okay. Which makes it, that's fun.
So, yeah, I think that's enough of the 90s version. Yeah. Because, like I said, they get into, you got an episode, I got to mention these. You got an episode in which Arcane is dying. And as he's dying, he ends up going on trial, and they use like all the characters to play like his attorney, and it's a weird episode. They have an episode with the guy from Miami Vice that was a kind of interesting episode, but again goes to that anthology type thing where he and his wife find out that they're actually ghosts who've been dead for 10 years. And they have to figure out who their killer is.
Okay.
And again, Swamp Thing's not needed in this episode at all. There's a rock musician who the episode opens up, and here's again where they're separating. This isn't for kids. The episode opens up with two teenagers committing suicide. This rocker finds out that it's because of his music, and he's now on a break in a cabin near the swamp for some reason. And Swamp Thing makes him like hallucinate. I don't know what's going on, but he pretty much has to face that his music is having this effect on people.
Oh my god.
It's a horrible episode. It's a horrible episode. There's a corrupted lawyer who gets... This one's not even a hallucination or anything. They trick him, and it's Will that tricks him. It's not even Swamp Thing. They trick him into facing his former clients who he sent to death row, and they were electrocuted or they lethal injection, whatever they were. But then you find out that it was all a setup in this giant warehouse, and they weren't the actual clients. They were like the client's brother or the client's son that's now grown up, or yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then, like I said, then there were time traveling episodes, which one of those was when the order becomes strange again, because there's an episode where Tressa goes and talks to Swamp Thing about something, and I'm sitting there going, when did Tressa find out about Swamp Thing? And it's because she does it. They don't meet until several episodes later. So, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so again,
I mean, to be fair, they're at least showcasing some of Swamp Thing's powers, because he does have the ability to create hallucinogens, pheromones, all that kind of stuff. He can kind of mess with people's mental state and make them see things, stuff like that. Again, the time travel thing, maybe not so much.
Yeah, they do some time traveling.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's move. You know what? We talked about this, and I say we just do it. We can do it real quick. 1990s Swamp Thing. I know you have seen very little of it. Would you bag it, stack it, or trade it?
It's trade it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Look, I sat and watched all 72 episodes. Would I ever watch them again? Yes. I'm not gonna lie. I would. But I'm that type of nerd. Again, I own the DVD set. I have the series on DVD. So, but I would still say trade it. Don't watch this. Don't watch this.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Is the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
All right, let's move on to I was about to just say 19 again, but now we're in the 2000s. 2019, the DC Universe series. I guess that's what you should officially call it, even though DC Universe doesn't exist anymore. But the DC Universe series, it aired from May 31st to August 2nd. Only had 10 episodes, sadly.
It did get sold to CW, and I think that's where the problem lies, to be 100%. And this is all pure conjecture. Like, I don't have any industry contacts or anything that told me anything. And but it seems like it was a very unfortunately timed show in several ways. You have DC that was, they had their own platform, which was a terrible idea. Let's all be honest. But you did have a couple of good shows already on there. Titans
and Doom Patrol.
And Doom Patrol had already started. And Doom Patrol in particular already had like a pretty, interesting audience, people that were coming to watch it. So this show gets made at the same time that DC and as Time Warner are getting sold to AT&T. So AT&T did not want to continue DC's own, platform, streaming platform. So that was already kind of handwriting on the wall. And then two, you have, the beginning of COVID that shut everything down when they would have come back to film season 2. So it I don't know, it's really unfortunate in that sense. And because it went to CW, I think that was really the final nail in the coffin. I just don't.
But it had already been canceled by that point.
Right, but they picked it up. CW picked it up.
Well,
so there was a theory they were going to move forward with it.
Yes, because that didn't happen until like summer of 2020. like almost an entire year later.
Right. So there was some talk that they were going to try to
Yeah, you had the
revitalize
hashtag Save Swamp Thing that was going around when that happened.
If you remember, though, it's at the same time that the Constantine show was gonna be made. So I think this is totally just Chad's conjecture, but I think you take those two shows and you compare them to the rest of the CW Berlanti universe, and you go, these don't fit, you know.
Well, and that was part of the talk while it was on DC Universe, because you had Titans that was a little darker, but then so it and Doom Patrol, very comic bookish still, even though Titans had a little bit of a darker edge to it, still very comic bookish. And then
Alan Tudyk makes references to them being in a comic book, but yeah.
And then whereas Titans did have an overarching storyline, Doom Patrol was the, you know, villain of the week. And so then you get Swamp Thing coming in with what is clearly just one story getting told over an entire season. You don't have the weekly villain. You don't have a one story arc, but then they got to do these little side things. It is one story getting told over 10 episodes.
And what's sad
I heard
to me
that's something that AT&T, Time Warner, whoever, they weren't a fan of. They were not a fan of.
Yeah,
I was, but they were not.
It was great. Yeah. It's really disappointing because they really... I was trying to think of another show that really took the time to, like you're saying, only tell one story over a 10-episode span, and they really basically just got through his origin story.
Yeah.
You know, I know we're all sick of origin stories, and every time somebody mentions, a new Spider-Man movie, we all laugh, or we're going to have to watch Uncle Ben die again, yada, yada, yada. Same thing with Batman.
Yeah,
but
that's the bane of my existence.
And this character deserved that, though, because he had not been treated outside of comic books, which, unless you're really deeply into comic books, you really weren't. You probably, odds are, you weren't a Swamp Thing fan to begin with, and he was just so mistreated in the other movies and shows that had been made. So even in DC animated properties, I felt like Swamp Thing was never really well treated in comparison to his stature in the books. And so I felt like the first time that somebody was taking the potential of that character and shining some light on it, which, if you've seen the show, is an ironic statement. It is very dark. But I don't know. The whole thing's just kind of tragic to me. It finally was making not a joke out of Swamp Thing, and then
definitely
it just
not a joke.
Yeah, no kidding. And then it just got shut down. So I don't know.
Yeah. So and I own this series on Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. There's not a single special feature on this box set, which you kind of guess. Well, I guess not. I mean,
yeah.
Who really wants to talk about it when after episode 1 they got canceled?
Well, I'm trying to remember which character it was. I think it's Maria, the actress that played. Like, she
posted an Instagram post that she eventually had to
getting
delete.
deleted. But she was pretty harsh about. She felt like everybody poured their heart and soul out, and it was a good product, and was very disappointed in Warner Brothers and what they did.
Well, and James Wan, who was behind the show, James Wan even talked about that it completely caught all of them off guard, because when the original plan, James Wan's original pitch to Warner Brothers, and the original plan was for a 3-season arc that would culminate, kind of like the Netflix show did, the Marvel shows did. It would culminate to Justice League Dark.
Nice.
Which makes sense when you're watching
the Constantine show I mentioned a minute ago was already.
But even in these 10 episodes, we're introduced not only to Swamp Thing, we're introduced to Blue Devil. Mm-hmm. We're introduced to the Phantom Stranger.
Man, you're stealing on my thunder. Yeah.
So,
I'm just kidding.
So yeah, we're already headed towards this group.
So it sounds like I was kind of being derogatory about the Berlanti-verse a minute ago. And full disclosure, it's not my cup of tea. I've watched the first several seasons of The Flash and stuff like that. It's okay. The thing that I will give it credit for is that you could put Blue Devil and Phantom Stranger into a show that is a fairly serious show, and it wasn't silly. And I think that that's one thing that Berlanti has done really, really well is make comic book, like very comic book things accessible. Like you don't have to go Christopher Nolan and never call her Catwoman to make it seem and feel kind of realistic. Like Berlanti has done a great job of getting rid of that. So by the time you get this show, you do, he's the Phantom Stranger. I don't think gets called the Phantom Stranger. He refers to himself as a stranger. How does he word it? He's like, I'm just a stranger. Perhaps a phantom of your imagination. Like it's something like that. Like
it's something like that.
It's pretty cool. But
and his the way he's dressed is like just ever so a loose interpretation
right
of the way the Phantom Stranger's dressed in the comics.
Yeah.
He puts the hat on, and I'm going, it's kind of the same hat.
Right.
But yeah, they already knew that it was going to be reduced. They were originally told 13 episodes. They knew it was going to be reduced to 10.
Mm.
But James Wan said that when they finished filming their 10 episodes, they walked away, leaving everything there, like they were going to be coming back.
Right. And it was, I should have written this down in notes, but wasn't it? It was like 3 days or 6 days. It was inside of a week.
It was
after
6 days. It was 6 days because it was announced the day before
the second
episode aired.
I knew it was in that week. Yeah, really disappointing. And not to mention, I mean, you would think just from a business practice, that's a bad idea. Don't you think that viewership is going to drop after you've canceled the show? Like, if you were not a Swamp Thing fan and already going to be watching this because you're into Swamp Thing, you may have tuned into the first episode. You went, okay, this is kind of cool. It's got some promise. Main character got murdered.
That first episode is one of the best first episodes in television, period.
Yeah, it's really good. The pilot is very, very good.
Because and it's not just because of the story they tell, it's the story they set up.
Right.
I mean, and it does something that you're talking about origins. It does something that very few shows can do. They establish, for instance, Abby and Alec's relationship after only knowing each other for a day.
Mm-hmm.
They establish their relationship so that we accept the connection that she has with Swamp Thing for the whole rest of the series.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
They do that so well. All the connections with all the characters.
Yeah. All that.
Matt
sheriff.
Cable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, all of it.
They did a great job and leave you wanting more. Like at the end, I mean, that is a barn burner of an end. And
even in the middle when you had, I thought it reminded me very much of The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing,
mm-hmm.
when the dead body in the morgue all of a sudden starts sprouting.
Yeah.
And then
they spent some money on that. Like, that's a pretty cool effect.
But even the way it's shot and the way Abby and Alec having to escape from the morgue and get away from that thing, that is an intense scene.
Yeah.
For a television show.
Yeah. Well, they were billing it as a horror show, so I did see that was some of the pushback. Is apparently Time Warner really wanted it to
a superhero show.
Yeah, and the production team wanted to make a horror version. So I don't know. I mean, it's a shame that it didn't get further produced, but it is a great show. I think it's worth going back and watching. It ends. They clearly were setting up. A new series. But that being said, like, you can watch the show and at least understand who the character is and get a good idea. And they don't go, dead on by the books.
No.
There definitely are some changes from the fairly minute stuff. Like, they really leaned into like Southern Gothic hard in the show, and so Like Abby in the books, she has this white hair with like one black stripe in it, and everything's black with her. She's got black hair and wears black all the time, and all that stuff. And so you get some aesthetics, and you kind of go, yeah, that's just artistic license. You can change aesthetic stuff, but then there's some. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say that they changed the character of Swamp Thing much, because you don't get to know him well enough in that sense. Like, it's almost a real time. Like, you see the first 10 days of his existence, and he's a baby, and he's just finding out all the stuff that he's capable of. So
that episode where the Swamp Thing is born, and then he's wrestling with what he is, and starts ripping him, like when he pulls
he's tearing
the part
parts
of
his head off.
Tearing part of his head off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like how they keep returning to that. Like, he doesn't understand what's going on by episode 9 when he's being autopsied alive. And so, you get that whole thing, and it was just good writing. Like, the idea that the plant entity took so much of Alan's memories that it even made organs that don't really work. And you get to kind of view this all through Woodrow's eyes as he dismantles him, and it's just
which is from the Alan Moore run. That is from the Alan Moore run.
It's super creepy to watch, but at the same time, like, it's just very driving to see this creature struggle with what it is, and what does that mean as far as like what are his ethics and all this kind of stuff. And he straight up murders some people pretty early in this.
Straight up murders. He rips the guy's limbs off. Yeah. Yeah,
it's pretty brutal. Don't watch this with your kids, maybe, but
oh no. But they said they make that very clear even in the opening of the first episode. Yeah. When it's not Swamp Thing, it's just the swamp killing 3 illegal fishermen.
Yeah.
And again, turning one of them into a tree in essence.
Yep. But they changed the Alan character a little bit. So
they definitely did.
Yeah.
Or Alec.
Yes, gosh, I keep saying that.
Yeah,
because
you said Alan
Moore. It's because of my whole Alan Moore gaffe earlier, so I keep saying Alan now. But Alec is I kind of like what they did with him, though. To be fair, if you're going to change a character, it should at least be better. Yeah. It should drive the story better. And it also
works for the fact that you've got to get to him being Swamp Thing so much quicker.
Yeah.
And you can't build this. You can't have him already being married to Linda.
Right.
Like he's he's been in the comics. You can't already establish that, because then you can't set up his relationship with Abby.
Right.
You can't have him
at least
be involved.
Him be a hero.
Yes, yeah. And you can't have him be involved in this, kind of government funded or privately even funded. Even though they kind of do that because they say he's working for Sutherland.
Right.
Although you then immediately find out that Sutherland had fired him.
Right.
But yet he was still doing the job. But having that whole connection where someone's trying to steal his idea.
Well, the thing that was interesting to me is they make him morally questionable from the beginning. Yeah. Like the whole thing about that Abby confronts him that he had been fired from his previous research for lying about it to get better funding and everything. So even as a human, he's already wrestling with moral ambiguity and ethical questions. And so now his, whatever you want to call it, spirit, memories, how that's a whole other thing to wrestle with, are now in this other being that now has to also wrestle with the exponentially larger set of questions there. So it's just if you're going to make a change, like at least make it a fascinating change, in my opinion. Yeah. And it was good. They did it. And so
yeah, it was good. Yeah, and I also like that Andy Bean, the actor who played Alec Holland, I like that he's not the macho, suave, your typical he's the good-looking hero. I like that he's just regular dude. He just looks like a regular dude.
Which that's also some.
Not saying he's not good looking, but regular.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's a 2 or something, but he's a. But That was actually some of the pushback that some of the, Instagram, followers and stuff were saying, that when it went to CW, of course they're not going to pick it up. It doesn't have, the ripped abs hero to carry the show.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's true or not. Who knows? But it's sad nonetheless.
Yeah, I want to throw this out. We're talking about all the reasons why it was canceled, all the reasons why it wasn't picked up. The official statement was just creative differences. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the official statement.
Which is basically, we're not going to tell you.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So no one knows for sure
right.
why this show was canceled. I mean, there's the rumors about the merger. There were rumors about money. There were rumors. I do think it was creative differences. It was James Wan had his idea. Warner Brothers, AT&T, whoever had their ideas, and James Wan wasn't willing to bend. And so they just went, okay, well then no more show.
Well, good for him that
I agree.
He stayed to his artistic vision, but it's just sad that somebody didn't continue it.
So let's go through characters really quick. I already mentioned Andy Bean playing Alec Holland. We talked about him. Great. Crystal Reed, who was playing Abby Arcane. What do you think about the fact this show was really centered around her?
So I thought it was super clever. It sets up, if you know the comic run, it sets up some really cool stuff in the future. So I'd love to sit down with James and ask what his long-term plans were.
Yeah.
Because if you know her comic run, she becomes so you have the green, which is the force of all, plant life in our universe, apparently, which Swamp Thing is the avatar on Earth of that. What do they call it? The Parliament of Trees, and all that kind of stuff. So he's the representative in body of all living plant life, and she eventually becomes the representative of the rot, which is the polar opposite. It's decay and death and all this kind of stuff.
Which is what this show, the virus, quote unquote, that was affecting people, was the rot.
Yeah. So it was. They had already introduced the idea of the rot, and you have her as really the main character. It really was setting up some very interesting stuff in the long run, which obviously is why I would like to sit down and pick James's brain about where he was going with it. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was done really well in that sense, and I think she did a great job. Like you were saying earlier, it was believable that she has an investment in this dude she sees gets murdered basically at the end of episode 1. But you also believe in her other relationships, the whole her and Liz,
Matt Cable.
Gosh, what's the mom of the girl that she's being accused of killing? It's kind of, that never got a lot of finality, but
yeah, the I can't remember her first name right now, but it's Sunderland's wife.
Yeah, I can't remember her name either, but anyways, like the confrontation between them, telling her to get out of town, and it was really well acted. I thought it was well written. It sets the next thing up well without just being A to B to C, that sort of thing. It doesn't seem to me to be methodical or equation based. It was pretty organic, no pun intended. But
speaking of, let's move to Swamp Thing. So, for the first time ever, Swamp Thing is not played by Dick Durock. He's played by Derek Mears, who was also the guy who took over the role of Jason in the 2009 Friday the 13th. Another famous kind of stuntman. I don't know. Again, this is why I kind of wish there were some special features. How much of that suit was a suit, and how much of it was CGI?
Not much. You can find some special features online of him getting put in the suit.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff on YouTube and everything of him getting suited up and the process of that was. That's a great suit. They did a fantastic job of that. It's more practical effect than it is CGI. I think they were just kind of cleaning stuff up with the CGI. So
well, and also it's constantly moving.
Yeah.
So they're doing that.
Yeah, of course, there's that part.
Yeah, the CGI. I got to throw in. You've mentioned Liz a couple of times. So of course she's Madame Tremaine from the comics. First time ever live action of Madame Tremaine. I just like that. I like that they're bringing in these characters. You know, again, Swamp Thing's not a big comic, even though he should be. And there's all of these great characters, and so they bring in Madame Tremaine. They bring in Daniel Cassidy, who then becomes the Blue. It's his origin too, in the show. He becomes the Blue Devil. Yep. In this in this series. They bring in the Phantom Stranger, as we talked about earlier, with no explanation. They give him no explanation.
Well, again, like, it's just stuff that they never allowed to be built, because there was already talk that there was a Constantine show coming. There was already talk that there would be crossovers, that we would probably see Swamp Thing in Constantine, which, if you know the books at all, they have a very interesting relationship. They're two of my favorite characters to see interact on a page, bar none. And
Constantine debuted in the Swamp Thing comics.
Yeah. But their whole relationship is super interesting. But anyways, and so you already had those things were going to happen. So you think there was so much more to explore, and it's just frustrating. that they didn't get to do.
Yeah, because
they end with introducing a character.
That's what I'm saying. Well, two characters, really.
Yeah.
Because you've got Matt Cable, for people who don't know the comics. So in the original Swamp Thing, the original Len Wein Swamp Thing #1, Matt Cable is a Department of Defense agent who is hired to work with the Hollands on this experiment. Then when the Hollands are killed and he becomes Swamp Thing, Matt Cable thinks that Swamp Thing killed the Hollands, and so he's constantly tracking them down. Fast forward to Alan Moore's run, Matt Cable and Abby are a married couple. They are friends with Swamp Thing. But then eventually Matt is killed and becomes the Raven. He's a spirit. And what do they do at the end of this series? They turn him into the Raven.
Yep.
They don't say it, but he's a ghost at the end of the series. And then, of course, you're also referring to Dr. Woodrow becoming Floronic Man.
Floronic Man. Which I was just hoping they wouldn't use the Floronic Man, the actual title.
Yeah, it is a weird name.
It is one of the worst names in all comic books. But he's also called, what is it? He's called Floro for short. But what's the big run later? Oh, Cedar.
Yeah.
Cedar, not Cedar Wood, but which that would have kind of been my vote for where to go with it for. But I mean, and that's a great man, and that's such a good run, because the Cedar is the exact. He's the opposite. Like, he's the human that got taken by the Green, because they're both agents of the Green. That's what makes it very interesting. And so you have one that still is kind of connected to his humanity. And then you have the Floronic Man, who literally says, "Why would anyone want to go back to being human?" And doesn't. And so in the comic books, he literally is going to wipe out all human life. And Swamp Thing, again, this is one of the great things about Swamp Thing. He doesn't always just win out of strength or the power that he has. He convinces Floronic Man that that's a terrible idea, because you don't have anything to consume the oxygen that plant life makes, that it takes all beings on to make the life cycle,
the circle of life.
So it's anyways, so there was some very, very, very interesting stuff getting set up in the very final moments of the last episode, so that we'll never get to see.
So sad. Although I will say, can you recall, are any of these actors doing other things right now? Like, could we maybe could HBO Max bring it back?
Awesome.
Because which is the thing. This series, I couldn't find it anywhere.
Right.
Like, I think you could pay for it on Apple TV. You could pay to see it.
Yep.
But again, luckily I own the series on Blu-ray, but it's not on CW, even though CW had the rights to show it. It's not on CW anymore. It's not on HBO Max, even though most DC stuff is on HBO Max.
Right.
It's not. I mean, Titans is on HBO Max, Doom Patrol is on HBO Max, Stargirl is on HBO. All the other shows that came from DC Universe.
All the old properties are. All the catalog of stuff that was on DC Universe. All the old animated shows, everything. But
I mean, I understand
strangely,
why.
not Swamp Thing.
Yeah, I understand why the movies, because the movies are technically MGM movies.
Right.
So I get that. There's probably still some legality rights there. The television show was USA, so that means they're owned by Universal. So if they're going to appear on anything, it's going to be Peacock. So I get all of that, but this show is a Warner Brothers DC show.
Right.
Why is it not on HBO Max?
Maybe they're going to try to make... I mean, if you were going to relaunch it, that would make sense. You hold on to it and then you throw that season out to let people whet their appetite, and then you show season 2. So that'd be cool, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I'm not either. And I mean, you got Matt Ryan as Constantine chilling on CW on Legends of Tomorrow, and
yeah,
you know, they already have so many people confused with the movies versus the television shows.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no kidding.
If you then have two sets of characters on two different TV shows, it just gets even weirder. Well, let's throw at the big circle of Swamp Thing. So it all started in 1982 with the Swamp Thing movie starring Adrienne Barbeau. It ends with 2019's television show, which has an appearance by Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah. Yeah, I did want to
playing Abby's boss.
Yep. And she's 70, I think, at the time that they filmed this. And if you look at her, yeah, I'm pretty sure she was 70 years old when they filmed it. And if you look at her IMDb, she is impressively working. Like, she was doing video game voice work. She was in, I can't remember the shows, but she had been in several various projects.
I mean, I know this isn't really recent, but I remember when she was on the Drew Carey show.
Yeah, no kidding. But still at it into her 70s, so good for her. And a much better character this time around. So, but anyways, another fun factoid. Did you notice that all of the titles of the 10 episodes, with the exception of Pilot, which obviously is just the pilot, and episode 3, are all names of Bruce Springsteen songs?
I remember hearing that. I would never have known that. I'm not a huge enough fan of the boss. So I would have never known that, but I had heard that before.
Yeah.
He has a song called The Anatomy Lesson.
Apparently. Maybe I got the episodes wrong. Maybe it wasn't 3, but...
That was number 9. No, episode 3 is He Speaks. That feels like it's the title of a song.
Yeah, you might be right. It might have been 9. But I don't remember.
Drive All Night. I think that would be the only one I would go, oh yeah, I know that.
Episode 9 might be my favorite episode.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, that's the one with the autopsy. Next to the pilot. I stand by.
Great pilot.
Great pilot. Amazing pilot. Let's talk about, actually, now that I'm looking at the Blu-ray, I want to talk about this real quick. Do you think that their main poster for the show is a spoiler? do you think people have pick up on that it's a spoiler?
That's what episode is that? Where that might be episode 9 as well.
It may be.
No, I think it is. I think that's
because that's when he finds out. Yeah, that's when he finds out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he goes back to the swamp and he finds Alec Holland's remains, and he carries them out of the swamp.
Boy, and they really are remains. Like, it's
yeah. He's been eaten by whatever's down there, and you gotta think, hadn't it only been a few days?
Yeah, that was kind of my response. I was like, man, I guess it's a swamp. There's a lot of critters in there, crabs and shrimp and everything else that just go to work. But, he was in rough shape. That's the other part about why I was saying episode 9, like, is one of my favorites. That is a heartbreaking scene when he just tells Abby, like, he's dead. Alec is dead.
Yeah, I've now got so many scenes running through my head. Because even after Cassidy turns into Blue Devil, him just ripping those guys apart. Whew. This is a violent show. A very violent show. Do not watch. This is not for kids. Do not watch the show with a kid. if you've even seen Titans and going, oh, that's too much for my kid. Swamp Thing's like that times 7. Like,
I think we had to make. Yeah, I think we had to make a very similar one for Doom Patrol not that long ago. But Doom Patrol is like language and like dirty
suggestive,
jokes.
yeah.
Them being farted out of a donkey butt and just stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But nope, Swamp Thing is just pure on violence, like
violence. Violent. And what? I'm not even going to say it's violence for the sake of violence. Like, it's violence for the story of they're telling.
Yeah.
Because again, they are trying to tell a horror story.
Right.
Which I do want to ask, does the horror work, or did they back off of it too much? Did they rely too much on jump scares? Did they rely too much on the gore to be the horror? Like, what are your thoughts on the actual horror element and their success of making a horror television show?
I've never been a fan of jump scares, so not that I get easily scared or anything. It's just a cheap gimmick to me, So, but I kind of, some of the gore stuff is really good. The rot, when that little girl is coughing this like motor oil mucus into her hand, you're like, whoa, there's, just as a human, you're like, that is not good. And then when her dad seemingly comes back to life on the table in the mortuary, you're like, that is a very well done and complex scene. Just the way that his head kind of stays on and gives you just enough question, especially if you're a casual viewer and you don't know that Alec Holland is Swamp Thing and we're going that way. You kind of had to wonder, like, is that how Swamp Thing comes to life? Like, what's going on? So, I thought it was pretty well done in that sense. Even maybe they oversold, Alec's body being deteriorated too much, like we were just talking about. But I mean, that is an emotional scene for several reasons, but not the least of which is just how dead he is. Like, there's no question about it. Like, but
again, going back to the 90s one, it'd be Swamp Thing going, yeah, I can't bring him back. His soul has left.
He is out of here.
Yeah. There's no more Alec Holland. All right. You know what? We did it for the 90s one, but I think we know where we're both going with this one. So bag it, stack it, or trade it.
I'm going to bag it. I really enjoyed this show.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. HBO Max, bring this show back.
Yeah.
Bring this show back.
It's super hard to compare to anything else just because they only got 10 shows. So you kind of go, maybe that's unfair because you could have a great start and then turn into a garbage show. I mean, it's happened before. Lost. But
again, the plan was only 3 seasons. And I think James Wan was going to stick to the 3 seasons.
Yeah. But man, just like it's in my mind, it's as good or better of a first 10 episodes of anything else that we've been on here raving about before. So,
all right. So that's it for Swamp Thing as a TV show. Maybe one day, fingers crossed, we get to come back and talk about more Swamp Thing as a TV show. And maybe we'll get lucky, and with DC going different routes in the movies, maybe they'll finally bring Swamp Thing back to theaters and we'll get a Swamp Thing movie. Look, DC, Marvel made a Man Thing movie. You can make another Swamp Thing movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is what it is. All right, thanks, Chad.
I think you have people that would go out for that now. I mean, maybe 10, 20 years ago, no, but with the success of Sandman and a lot of other of the dark DC properties, like, bring it back. Bring Swamp Thing back. Let's bring Constantine back. Let's take another run at some of that stuff.
Or heck, since there is more, I think, notoriety with Constantine, with not only Matt Ryan continuing to play the character on television, but Keanu Reeves even talking about wanting to do another Constantine movie, which I'm mixed about that.
He's aged well. I could see him playing a crusty old Constantine, but maybe.
You know what? Constantine was introduced in a Swamp Thing comic. Introduce Swamp Thing in a Constantine movie. There you go.
Yeah.
Let's do that. But thanks, Chad. Thanks, everybody, for going down this journey of the Swamp Thing television series. We're going to be finishing up with our march through Swamp Thing with our March Madness. And we'll get back to all of our other movies, television shows, and discussions that we have in April and beyond. So join us for those. If you like the show, you know what to do. Rate and review us. Give us that 5-star rating. Help other people find this show. You know, again, we go back into the 90s, and we talked about Heather Locklear with the sequel. Remember that commercial? You know, you tell 2 people, and they tell 2 people, and so on, and so on, and so on. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. For Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.